Hey there, welcome to my channel. My name is Kris, and my husband and I live in Manzanillo, Mexico, in a house that we custom built last year. We learned so much about the process of building a house in Mexico, and it's really different from building a house in the United States. We wanted to share what we learned with others who are thinking about doing the same. I am really looking forward to bringing you videos about buying, building, designing, and maintaining your Mexican dream home. I want to talk about the 3 most important things that you need to do before you commit to buying a house in Mexico. The first one is try before you buy. I know it's said a lot, but I want to say it again. You really need to visit a bunch of different places to see what fits with your personality. You might really be surprised at how different a vibe you can get from different areas of Mexico. Now, you might be saying, hey, I have got to have a beach house. I mean, my husband and I, that was our #1 priority when we were living in Colorado. That we needed to come to Mexico for the beach. But I still recommend that you take your time and check out some other areas as well, even if beach is your top priority. Mexico is a huge country. It is super diverse. You may be surprised at what you actually gravitate to. Each place has a different vibe and a different level of amenities. And sometimes there's a trade-off. You may fall in love with that quaint, beautiful beach town, but the nearest grocery store is a 45-minute drive away. So when you're planning your vacations, pick a whole bunch of different places to visit. And when you're there, take a little bit of time to check out sort of the more mundane aspects of the town. You can also search on Google Maps for doctors, banks, supermarkets, and see what kind of availability there is. That will get you a much better feel for what daily life looks like. Try to fit in sort of the normal daily routine that you might follow, like going to the market and buying some groceries. Maybe try getting a haircut or getting your nails done. Doing these normal daily activities will make you feel less like a tourist and more like a local. If you are able to rent a car, you can explore even further. You can drive outside the city, see what kind of neighborhoods are available farther from the center. Often they're called fraccionamientos. Speaking of these Spanish words that I'm throwing out, Spanish schools are an excellent way to get to know an area. You can find them in most major cities and some of the smaller beach towns and other towns that cater to more of a tourist population. Spanish schools give you the opportunity to not only learn the language, which you're going to need to know if you're going to live here, but also learn about the culture of Mexico. Oftentimes, the language schools will offer cooking classes, day tours. They can also help you find a rental nearby, or even do a homestay with a family, which is actually what my husband and I did before we moved here. One of our first experiences in Mexico was attending a Spanish language school in Cuernavaca, and we actually brought our kids with us. We stayed in a family home, and we really got to experience what life might be like living in Mexico. Okay, now the second thing that you need to do before you commit to buying a house here in Mexico is really doing a deep dive into what it's like to live here. Well, there's a new term that's floating around the internet called slow travel. And it's interpreted by a lot of people to mean going to a location that is a travel destination and then spending sort of like your regular life there. Once you've picked 1 or 2 places that you really enjoyed being a tourist in, you need to go back and plan some longer stays. Your goal now is to get a realistic idea of what life might be like. You really want to focus on renting a home or condo that you could see yourself living in. You want to find out, is it comfortable? Is it all that you need? Is it big enough? If you can, pay separately for water, electricity, internet. If you can't actually pay yourself, see if you can ask the landlord for an idea of what the cost is. Normally, electricity and water bills only come every 2 months, so you'd have to organize at least a 2 to 3 month stay to make this work. If you find out that you need to run the AC all day and all night to be comfortable, that electric bill might be a bit of a surprise. Which brings me to my next point, and that is track your expenses. I know there are a lot of content creators that talk about how they can live in Mexico for $1,000 a month or $1,200 a month. And I'm not saying that they're lying. I'm sure that they're doing that. But the lifestyle that they're living may not line up with what you want. For example, maybe you want a housekeeper, or you want a house with a yard and you'll need a gardener. How often do you enjoy eating out? Are you going to have a car? How much driving do you think you'll do? The gas here in Mexico is almost double that of the US right now. When everything adds up at the end of the month, is it what you were expecting? You need to plan these slow travels several times because you need to experience the weather at different times of the year. The hottest weather doesn't always occur in July and August in Mexico. Sometimes the really, really hot months are in the spring, actually during the transition between the dry season and the rainy season. I know here in Manzanillo, the hottest times of the year are May and June. Even if your plan is to snowbird, you definitely need to experience the weather during the times that you plan to be here and make sure that it lines up with the weather back home. You may not be here for medical tourism, but you still need to get an idea of the kinds of medical services and the quality that's available. I recommend that you get either a dental cleaning or an eye exam. Or if you have knee or back problems, you can try out some physical therapy. These kinds of services are so inexpensive that they're probably worth it even if you have insurance back home. You really need to take your time before you buy something here in Mexico. The reason is that the real estate market in Mexico is entirely different from the United States or Canada. It can take a really long time to sell a house or even longer to sell a piece of land. There is no countrywide multiple listing service. There's no Zillow. Most Mexican families buy property and hold onto it for generations. There are lots and homes with for sale signs that have had these signs on them for years. In fact, the lot that my husband and I purchased was probably for sale at least 10 years before we bought it. Now, don't go running away from your dream of having property here in Mexico if that's your final goal. And in fact, if you choose certain areas, you will have an easier time selling the property if it turns out that it's not for you. Playa del Carmen, Puerto Vallarta, Lake Chapala, and of course the entire Baja coast are very expat friendly and have their own local real estate market that allows people to buy and sell property much more easily. And if your taste and budget is modest, you'll be happy to know that it's a lot easier to sell a small home than it is a big mansion. And most towns have a pretty active rental market. So even if you decide that living in Mexico isn't for you, you probably won't have a hard time finding someone else to rent, at least temporarily, while you look for a buyer. With that in mind, I come to my final and absolutely most important thing that you need to do before you buy a home here in Mexico. And that is make connections. When you are visiting your favorite places in Mexico and living here for 1 month or 2 months, you're really doing something more than just slow traveling because you're intending on staying here for the long term. And the key to being happy with where you are living is in the social connections that are around you. Making friends and social connections and working in your community is pretty easy when you speak the language, which is one reason why it's so important that you make an effort to learn some Spanish. But you'd be surprised at how welcoming Mexicans are to people who don't speak the language very well. My husband and I can attest to that. There are a lot of Mexicans who do speak some English, and it's amazing how much you can communicate between broken Spanish, broken English, and a heck of a lot of Google Translate. But you're not just limited to making Mexican friends. You can find expat communities in most of the major towns and cities. There's usually a restaurant or a bar where the local expat community tends to congregate. I suggest showing up, see who's there, make some friends, and find out what kind of activities or gatherings are planned. Having a social network is so important, I can't emphasize it enough. And I speak from personal experience. We have been visiting Mexico since 2008, and our first visit to Manzanillo was in 2010 when we decided to live here full time. My husband likes to joke that his midlife crisis was moving to Mexico instead of buying a Harley Davidson. We chose Mexico because it was near the United States, we had 2 children, and it would give us an opportunity to experience another culture with them, but still be near enough to return home if our family needed us. And we chose Manzanillo as a home base and used it to explore other parts of the country. We had actually narrowed down our choices between Manzanillo, which is on the Pacific coast, and Merida, which is on the Gulf of Mexico. It was literally a flip of the coin. We bought a plane ticket to go visit Manzanillo first. And when we got here, it checked all of the boxes. We liked the vibe of the town. So we actually never made it to Merida. During the 2 years that we lived there, we made some really, really good friendships. And even after we moved back to the US, we kept those friendships alive. We helped a few of our friends come to the US on language visas so that they could study English. And Kevin also started working with some people in Mexico. He's in software development and he made some connections there. We just kept finding ourselves being drawn back to the town where all of these friendships had started. So finally in 2021, we took the plunge and purchased some land and then designed and built a house. And I am so looking forward to telling you about that process in future videos. So the most important thing that you need to remember and take away from this video is to take your time. Give yourself a chance to experience the different ways that you can live in Mexico. You'll not only find the perfect place that checks all of your practical boxes, but you'll also get that feeling that you can make that place your home. And if you give yourself a chance to make friends and find connections, then you won't regret your decision to put down roots because the time will be right. Thank you so much for spending some time with me, and until next time, bienvenido a casa.